Dietitians, I'm here to get you ready for your test on Friday. These are probably the most important things that you can remember that's going to help you with pretty much everything on your test. So I need you to write all of this down. So if you want to pause it and write it, you can, or if you want to write it while I'm talking, that's fine. The X, remember when we're looking at independent and dependent values, the X is always going to represent the independent and the Y is always going to represent the dependent. So if I have a rule of X plus something, it equals Y. It's because the X is the independent, the Y is a dependent. If I see it in a graph, remember that the X-axis is the one that goes side to side, the Y-axis goes up and down. The X is independent, the Y is dependent. You might even want to write this to help you remember, because the X-axis goes that way and the Y-axis goes this way. That might also help you remember the independent and the dependent. So you're going to have several questions that are asking you things like, what does the X equal? You might have something about a graph and wanting to know which axis is the independent or which axis is the dependent. You might even see a question where you have to figure out which one is the independent, which one is the dependent, and then know which axis it goes on. So there's a lot of that going on. X is independent, Y is dependent. You're also going to have some percentage questions on there. So just to kind of review, remember we're looking at is over of equals percent over 100. And you're just going to plug in your numbers just like we've been doing all week on those reviews. Hopefully you'll do good with that because we've been working really, really hard on it. There's a couple questions that are just a little bit on the tricky side that might give you some problems, so I want to go over those. One thing I did forget to tell you also is that you're going to have an input-output table. You've got to figure out the rule, and then based on the rule, you're going to figure out the answer. I don't think that's going to be too hard for you. The question that's probably going to give you the most problem is a percent question, and it has a number, and you had to figure out, it's talking about somebody saving money, and so they're saving money towards something, and they've saved a certain percentage of the money, but they want to know how much more they need to get there. So guys, that's just like the ones that we're doing that gave you trouble last week on the Spiral Review. Remember the one with the eggs where it said that 30 of them had been broken and there was, I'm sorry, no, 3 were broken, there was 30 altogether. How many of them survived? The survived was the 27, not the 3, and then you find the percent based on that. Interrupted by the bell. So what I'm saying is that make sure you're paying attention when it's asking. If it's asking the straight up percent of something, it's pretty easy, you've got it. But there is one question in there. It's not asking you what is the what amount is for that percent. It's actually going to be the opposite of that because it's not how much they've saved, it's how much they still need. So what they've saved is already done. You have to figure out how much they need after they saved. So read your questions carefully, go through it carefully. I think you'll be okay. There's 10 questions. Most of them are independent and dependent, and you seem to be doing pretty good with that. So take your time on your test. This is your last test before Christmas. Woohoo! Next test will not be until next year in 2017. Remember, our grade book closes on Thursday, so you want to take your time on this test because you're not going to have a lot of time to correct it if you don't like your grade.